intersection, what are the risks? So for example, for me, when I look at this, really the biggest risk is you just take the money and gamble it. Like you don't put the money on the cases.
Yeah, and that is I think the most uncomfortable part for people. That is, and that's what I was going to say. I mean, I think from a risk perspective, assuming I am doing what I'm supposed to be doing, there really is no risk to the money itself, because the money is going to disbursements, which are either going to get recovered in some way, as we've already discussed. The only risk would be because it's a bit of a blind loan, so to speak. It's going to me, and then the good faith would have to be that it's going to where it's supposed to go at the end of the day, which is the same risk as an example a bank takes in the same situation, because they don't lend money to files, they lend money to the lawyer who then disperses the money on the files. The same system is in play. So that would be the really only risk that's going on. So I think if you're that would be the part that I think anybody might be uncomfortable with. And I think if you're dealing with somebody that hasn't been around very long, or somebody who moves around a lot, or something like this, that may be more of a concern. I think if you're dealing with sort of older, more experienced, pretty much been in the same location for the last decade or 25 years, it's probably a more safer bet. But that's something that people need to take into account on their own when they consider it, because that is the one area of risk for people, for sure. I mean, if I was sitting on the other side, that would be the one thing that I would be wondering about.
Right.
Is that very thing. I mean, they get a personal guarantee from me, and as we've gone over before, I mean, I live in BC, I have a couple of properties in BC. I mean, I'm not going anywhere. So it generally, I think people are generally comfortable with it, but I'm sure there's been people that aren't comfortable with it and they haven't gone ahead, which is fair enough. I mean, I wouldn't knock them for having that concern. But yeah, that would be the one area that people would have to consider when they're wondering whether to do this or not.
Right, and that's part of the reason. That's the part of the reason why we do these kind of seminars like every few months, so people can meet you and judge for themselves, right?
Yeah, and that's what they would have to do, and that's what they would have to potentially Google and things like this, just to get a sense of who I am and what my reputation is in the legal community, and whether or not that would be likely that I would do something like that.
Right. And also we had this discussion because we thought of different ways to prove that, at least to show that the money is dispersed on disbursement, but like you said, some technical difficulties. Do you want to share that?
Yeah, well, it's the banks run into the same problems. I mean, we have the same discussions, or had the same discussions with banks before, when I used to use banks, and it's called solicitor-client privilege. I mean, nobody can know what anybody's file is. I mean, I cannot admit to anybody who my clients are. I can't admit that what's going on in their case, or what's being spent on their case, or what their case is about. I am not permitted to have any such discussions. I mean, I can't even admit, like, say somebody has a case. I mean, this is not something I can do. So any of the money that comes in cannot be attached or tracked to any particular file, at least not in a way that anybody lending money can be aware of, because then they would be broaching into that solicitor-client privilege, because they would get somebody's name, or they would get somebody's case information, which they're not allowed to have. So they need to stay sort of outside of that bubble, so to speak, which is one reason why the interest rate has always been higher. I mean, it's not like a traditional 3% loan or something like this, right? The interest rate's always been higher to reflect that reason, that it's a loan that people are making, that they're trusting a certain portion of it to be working the way that they're being told it's working, which is why the interest rate tends to be higher on these sort of things, which is why the banks charge higher interest rates on these things as well, and other organizations that have sprung up at various points in time to try to jump in and lend money on these things. I mean, it's a fairly big business right now with not only banks, but a lot of sort of loan companies are jumping up to try to get in on it because because the interest rate paid is high. And generally speaking, they're protected the same way lenders here would be protected with the after the event insurance and things like this. So it's a fairly hot commodity for people wanting to lend money on them, so long as they can get over the initial giving the money to a lawyer. I need to trust that lawyer to be doing with it what they're going to do, and that's what these other entities, these other companies do as well. They do their due diligence check on you, which is essentially Googling your name and asking around. And then if they're satisfied with that, then they go ahead and they do that.